Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR, and I'm your host, the counselor. Now, I gotta say, my heart was almost ripped out of my chest when I found out that there were a lot of babies showing up in emergency rooms because they had injuries. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like there are a lot of mothers under stress, and maybe they're under so much stress that they're reacting. But see, I made a bad assumption. I assumed that it was just the mothers. And I thought to myself, well, what could I really do? What should I be talking about to maybe address some of this? Well, the truth be told, it's not just the mothers. The mothers have a hell of a responsibility. It always falls on their shoulders. And we got to give them credit for all the work they do. But we also have to give them support. But it's also the fathers when they're dealing with the baby. Some of them might be acting a fool and hurting these children, or it could be a babysitter who doesn't know how to deal with crying. See, I've also known that when it comes to baby crying, that's one of the big stressors out there. Not understand the babies, not understanding what they're trying to communicate. A well-experienced mother, that's one thing. She might have a grip on it, but a new mother, a new father, a babysitter, a caregiver, they might be having some challenges in understanding what these baby cries are all about. And I think we're going to have to break it down, get a better understanding of what this baby's trying to tell you. And I'm going to tell you, after this little information session, a lot of you are going to have to listen to this podcast when you're dealing with the babies, because it's in our best interest and their best interest. We got to keep our babies safe. And it's so understandable why these parents are stressing out, or these support givers, or these fathers, or whatever. It's heartbreaking. But I think we need to talk about the very basics at least. Can we try to understand what these babies are trying to say? And the better we can understand them, maybe it might help a little bit. But there's just so many things that need to be done, of course. It's very stressful times for everyone. However, let's start at the beginning. And I think understanding baby cries is just a small part, but it does do something to help. It may be someone who's dealing with the baby who's stressing right out, and they're just like, I don't understand. And trust me, I can tell you right now, I'm a parent of a child who used to cry and cry and cry and cry. And I'll tell you, I used to do some dramatic things. I used to jump in that car and drive on the highway because that baby needed some comfort, and they couldn't get that comfort. I loved that baby. But what happened is I had to take it to the next level, and I drive that baby on the highway, and then I drive for miles. I don't care. And that baby will fall asleep, and that was my only solace. That was my relief. And you know what? It worked. It took a lot of work. Wife was all knocked out, couldn't handle because she had so much. She's tired. We got to understand. And that's where the men, you got to step up and do what you got to do, because you made the baby, right? You didn't say maybe. You made the baby. So you can't be saying maybe along the way. So this is why I say to you, we got to do our part. And this is where we start, by trying to understand that baby. See, babies communicate in their early life by crying. Your baby will cry often in the first 3 months. Babies cry when they want to be held or fed, or when they're uncomfortable or in pain. They also cry when they are overstimulated, bored, tired, or frustrated. See, your baby's cries will become more communicative as your baby grows. After 3 months, your baby will cry differently for different reasons. And there are some scientists that believe that different crying sounds may communicate different needs, even in the newborns. Even if you aren't sure what kind of crying you're hearing, you should always respond to a baby's cry. Quickly reacting to a baby is fundamental to their development. Now, I know in my culture, I'm going to give it to you real. You got to think about it this way. Like, in my culture, a lot of people were saying when we were growing up, it was like, that baby's up there crying. You better leave that baby. Let him cry. Let him get it out. And then there's people who, there's mothers going, I don't know if I could do that. Well, the research is saying, be careful, watch your baby. And I would kind of agree. I know, but there's two sides, right? There's the research and there's the culture side of, people saying how to raise babies. But we have to come with both. you know, and the research is based on, people. It's not just based on thin air. Like they're talking to people, they're, gathering the information, and I think that's important. Also, we have to validate the cultures, people of different cultures and different practices, and how they deal with their baby. But for the most part, if we're in the baby's best interest, we're going to understand that, try to get as much information as you can. But when it comes to raising babies, I can't tell you just leave your baby. In some cultures, just leave their baby out there. No. I know there's a lot of you been raised and your parents left you sitting in that crib and they're like, you know what? I couldn't do it. I couldn't attend to every little cry. So I had to let them cry it out and go to sleep. Well, we're going to talk about that. So I'm just saying, keep an eye on your baby. Don't stress yourself out, but understanding crying is important. All right. So learn the hunger cry. A baby who is ready to be fed is likely to begin crying quietly and slowly. The cry will build in volume, becoming loud and rhythmic. Each individual wail is likely to be short and low pitched. The cry of hunger is a cue to feed your baby. Unless you have fed your baby recently and are certain that your baby does not need more food to eat. Learn the pain cry. A baby who is in pain is likely to begin crying suddenly. The cry may be high-pitched and harsh. Each cry will be loud, brief, and piercing. The cry is designed to communicate urgency. If you hear the pain cry, respond immediately. Look for open diaper pins or snagged fingers. If you see nothing, try soothing the baby. The pain may have passed and the baby may need comforting. If your baby has an arched back and hard stomach, the pain cry may be due to gas. Soothe your baby and hold them tight and upright when nursing to limit stomach gas. If your baby's eyes is red and swollen or tearing, call your doctor. She may have a scratch or something in her eye, such as an eyelash. She might have something in that eye, which can cause some pain. In the case of prolonged pain crying, the baby may be sick or injured. Call a doctor if your baby cries more when being held or rocked, especially if you detect a fever. If your baby under 3 months old has a fever of 100.4 or 38 degrees Celsius, call your doctor right away, even if she is not fussy. And learn the fussy cry, people. Fussy crying is mild and may start and stop or go up and down in volume. Fussy crying may increase in volume if you ignore it. So don't hesitate to soothe your baby when they fuss. Fussy crying can communicate discomfort, or it may just mean your baby wants to be held. Babies often fuss at the same time every day, usually late in the afternoon or early in the morning. Babies cry fussily when they want to be held. Newborns may often fuss to be held as they are used to confined spaces. Check the diaper of a fussing baby. A fussy crying can indicate a wet or soiled diaper. Check the temperature. Your baby might fuss because he is too hot or too cold. The fussy cry can mean frustration. A baby may fuss when unable to fall asleep. The fussy cry can mean that your baby is overstimulated or understimulated. Newborns sometimes cry to shut out stimulation. Try adjusting light source, volume of music, or your baby's position. Don't worry too much if a newborn does not stop fussing when you soothe them. Some babies fuss at length in the first 3 months of life. You got to understand that prolonged cry and recognize normal prolonged crying. When you have checked for hunger, pain, and discomfort and have soothed your child, she may continue to cry. Sometimes babies just need to cry, especially in the first 3 months. Normal prolonged crying sounds like ordinary fussy crying. Your baby may be overstimulated or have excessive energy. A fantastic resource to help you understand normal prolonged crying is the period of purple crying, right? Right? And I would say this, you can go online, right? Go to https://don'tshake.org. /purple crying. This program provides materials to help you understand the characteristics of crying in normal, healthy babies. Normal, prolonged crying can last up to 5 hours per day. Determine colic crying. A baby with colic will cry intensely with no cause. The cry sounds distressed and is often high-pitched. It may sound like your baby's pain cry. Your baby may show signs of physical stress, clenching of the fists, curled up legs, and stomach clenching. Your baby may pass gas or soil his diaper at the end of an episode of colic crying. See, colic crying happens at least 3 hours per day, more than 3 days per week for at least 3 weeks. Unlike normal prolonged crying, colic crying tends to occur at the same time every day around the same time as fussy crying. Try to keep a diary of when your baby cries and for how long if your baby seems to cry a lot. Talk to your doctor if you are not sure if the crying is due to colic or not. The cause of colic is unknown. There is no proven remedy. Soothe a colicky baby and hold them upright when nursing to limit stomach gas. Your baby should not cry from colic after 3 or 4 months of age. Colic does not have any lasting ill effects on the baby's health or growth. Recognize abnormal crying. See, some cries may be telling you that something is seriously wrong. An abnormal cry may be very high pitched, up to 3 times as high as your normal baby's normal cry. It may also be unusually low pitched. A high or low cry that persists may indicate a severe illness. If your infant is crying in a way that sounds strange to you, call the doctor. And I can't even stress enough. Listen, there are people out there, I don't know if I should call the doctor. The doctor's getting paid, call him, right? And I also got to say, if you're sitting in that hospital, you know how they try to rush women out the hospital. If you're in a hospital, and let's say you're in there, because you know the standard is a day to 2 days for the general standard of care in the hospital once you have a baby. You know, they get you in and they try to get you out real quick. Well, I got to tell you from experience with my partner, what it is this. If you're in that hospital, all right, and you're a new mother, and you got to deal with that baby where you got to breastfeed or feed your baby, and they're saying you got to go home. You got to tell your partner, I'm not going home until I learn to do this thing, till I get this comfort feeling where I'm comfortable. There's no sense you leaving that hospital stressing yourself out. You tell them if you need more time. Speak up. This is your baby. Okay, whether it's your first or your second or your third, you have to stress the importance and make sure it's documented if they're still trying to get you out of there. Say, I'm not going anywhere. Tell them what you got to tell them until you could take care of that baby or get that baby latched on to feeding or whatever to a point where you can at least manage. Because, you know, there's so many things that happen when women have baby. I can't explain it. I'm just a messenger. Okay, I haven't been through it myself, but I'll tell you right now, I've been there with my partner, and I see they go through a hell of a lot. And sometimes, men, all genders, you need to support your partner when they're having babies. If your baby has been dropped or bumped and is crying abnormally, see a doctor right away. If your baby is crying abnormally and moving less or eating less than normal, she needs to see a doctor. Call the doctor if you notice unusual or fast or heavy breathing or movements your baby does not ordinarily make. Call an ambulance if your baby is blue in the face, especially in the mouth area. All right? There are so many things to consider when it comes to babies crying, and I've given you a lot of information. But you do need to know, listen over and over again about this. And you know what? As time goes on, you'll get better at hearing these sounds. You're going to do it for the baby. But what I do suggest is if you're not really sure, let's say you have a baby and you're not sure about the cry, don't be afraid to call for help. And if you're a new parent, all right, you need to take classes. Take them. Just because you had the baby doesn't mean you can't take baby classes. Most people take baby classes before they have baby. It makes sense. But sometimes something goes down, and if you need support, join a support group. You know, there could be someone that helps you. Or let's say you had a baby in a hospital, and you need to get a midwife. call the midwife. Have them listen. Maybe they're not going to be there for certain things, but you can ask, hey, can you support me? I need some help. Right? If you have a family member that's helping you with the baby, but you're not really comfortable in their methods, see, because we have family members that like to raise their babies. They know the right way to raise their babies, right? They raise them with discipline, they're strict, and some people say the way they're raising them, that's how you have to do it. It's been happening for 30 years. Well, it's not necessarily so. But you should listen to experienced people. But one thing I'm against is the discipline. I think when you do raise your babies with disappointment, not discipline. You shouldn't be putting your hands on your children too much because it's detrimental to their mental and physical health. Raise them with disappointment. And some of you are like, well, counselor, what do you mean raise them with disappointment? Well, even in the early stages, babies can see the nonverbal cues. You can't even really tell, but you should understand that through certain ages, the communication is going to be a little bit skewed. They're not going to be able to talk. So you trying to demand things of babies, that communication pattern, it happens at a certain age. I always recommend people learn stages of development when it comes to baby. Understand as children grow, they go through these stages of development. So I don't strongly recommend you beat your kids or put your hands on your kids. You have to learn how to deal with them. And there's some people that will push back and they'll say, no, counselor, that's not it. Raise them with disappointment. You learn that those kids, as you raise them, they'll see you tell them, you know what, that behavior is not acceptable. I'm very disappointed. And then they'll grow up not wanting to disappoint you. And I think that's where a lot of the young people are going today. It's the reaction stage, right? Where they don't get their life. You're used to popping them as a consequence, popping them in their bum or hitting them in their head. You should never, ever do that. And I've said this in many podcasts. You never, ever hit your kids, especially in their head. A lot of people say, hit them in the bum. I don't even recommend hitting them in the bum. And the reason why I say don't hit them in the bum, oh, well, there's cushion down there. No, that's not what the purpose is. That's for sitting. But some people hit them in the bum. And what happens, if you tell people, oh, you can just spank them in their bum, that's okay. You don't know you're talking about, counselor. Well, the truth is I do know what I'm talking about, because when you get angry, you make some bad decisions. So let's say you get angry at your child as they grow, and you are used to popping in them with a bum. Well, that might be on a 90%. But then there's that one time they really upset you. You go for the quickest, easiest, closest, and it might be upside the head. Black folks, we have a tendency to pop our kids upside. Not all black folks. I'm not going to categorize, but that's what. And remember, we have a history. You know what I mean? And we're wonderful people. We mean the best intentions, and not all black people do this. But what I'm saying, and there's so many cultures out there that believe in that. Even these religions out there talking about, spare the rod, spoil the child. Well, that's, people take that to the next level. And all I'm saying is, no, you should not have to be putting your hands on your children. You got to learn to communicate with them. All right? Because like I said, the only thing about it is people go too far. You know what I mean? Because most of the times, if you're messing with your children, like in the sense where you're going to discipline them, is you're not in the best mood, right? You ain't going to say, hey, your kid did something. You're going to be smiling, but you're going to be angry. So you don't want to get used to being physical. You have to raise them with disappointment. Oh, I wasn't really happy when you did that. I think you could do better. Or you're going to have to sit out here because you know what? I'm not happy with you. And use I statements, right? I'm not happy. I believe you could do better. And I know you're this, you know what I mean? You have to learn, as opposed to just cutting right to it and start popping them up. It's easy and it's quick for a lot of people, but it's so damaging. And remember, the things that we do get passed on from generation to generation. And I can't even tell you, and they never tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. You think about this. When you hit a child upside their head or have somebody hit their child upside their head, you think about that soft brain getting knocked around against that skull. And if you don't think that does damage, you think again. Because just because you think, oh, there's a skull, it's this, that. No, you think about those brain waves, right? You think about some of these kids that are growing up. You think about some of the damage that have happened to our children out there, whether it's certain sports. Some of us are just going along blindly. We don't even understand. The one thing we have to protect is the brain because it's got to develop and grow. And if you're bruising it along the way, some of the signals that have to go through those brains, right, they don't. So they get frustrated, they get angry, they overreact. Some of you parents are going to have to look at yourselves. When you have those children going to school, and I'll tell you, I'm telling you right now, I know. I have years and years of experience in education. And I know when it comes to children, I can see when there's children out there running around, my heart breaks. And those are the kids I work with a lot of the time. My heart breaks when I see that they're damaged in the sense that they've been beaten or they've been abused or they've been traumatized. And I just can't say enough that it's so culturally ingrained in not just black people, a lot of cultures. If you're doing that, you're doing damage. And that child is running around and they're not thinking properly or they're misbehaving, it's because their brain is damaged. In 80% of the cases, something's happened to them. Or they're in a sport where they're getting knocked around. I mean, even a sport like soccer. It sounds like it's so innocent, but think about it. Think about balls being kicked at your child's brain when they're little. They're little. Now, does it happen to everyone where everyone's messed up? No. But think about balls being kicked on the head or, and then it hits the kid in their head and their brains bouncing back or they're doing the headbutts. You see it in soccer when the ball comes up and they do the headbutts. Now, a lot of them say they're okay. But think it does have an impact. What about football? How many football players are beating up their wives, you know what I mean, and abusing their partners because their brains have been racked up? You know what I mean? Think about that. What about boxers? You've seen it. Some of the greatest boxers out there we've ever seen. Look at them. I respect and I admire them. Oh, they're fighting. But look what happens to the brain. Or I'm not going to name names, but some of the most famous boxers out there, look what happens when they traumatize the brain. We got to take care of it. What about hockey? How come they're not doing hockey as much? They're not doing as much fighting in hockey as they used to. If you go back to the 80s and the early 90s, there was a lot of hockey players. That's all they did, jumped on the ice and they're punching the crap out of each other. Well, why did they stop that so much? Because the research started coming out. Somebody started giving a hint on what is actually happening to some of these hockey players. Right? Some of them are abused. Some of them are physically and mentally abused. Some of them are traumatized. Some of them got to leave the sport. You're not going to look into it because they're not advertising. They're not going to tell you what's happening to some of these young people. It's ridiculous. They're not going to do that. Because if you do that, you're going to see, people are going to wise up and they're going to go, wait. You know what? If we have this fighting on something traumatizing has happened to these young people, it doesn't matter what kind of money, how much money is out there. It's terrible. And they don't want you. So they start the rules and going, yeah, it's traumatized. They know what happens to the young kids too. A lot of these kids are doing hockey and they're getting abused and slammed into boards and their brains are mush after a certain period of time. Not all kids. I'm just saying there's a percentage, but it's detrimental and it's not necessary. But for sports and your entertainment, we look the other way. I would like some of you to look at that. So when it comes to your children, it's hands off. I know you're going to have times when you're going to feel like you want to, but no, start out that way. Keep your hands to yourself. And I know it seems some people say, well, my kid acted this way because I didn't beat him enough. Not true. Not true at all. A lot of times you're fooling yourself. You want to believe you could always do better with your children. We should beat them. That's how it... No. You have to learn that that's not a method of communication. That's not how you're supposed to raise them. You know what I mean? And we could go into the history of... All I'm saying is the brain is the most powerful thing on this planet. That is primitive way of raising your children. You have to take some educational classes on how to raise their children. And some of you have to stop that bias. Get a little bit of understanding. Some of you just having children and raising children. And you know what? Then you figure out, after the fact, when something happens, I'll try to respond. But some of you need to, just because you took baby classes before you had the baby, that's it. No, you have to take some classes while your children are growing to understand the stages of development. How many of you do that? Not too many because you think you know better. See, as times change and become more complex, we have to change and adapt. things aren't the same as they were 30 years ago, right? Just as technology has changed, people have changed. See, 30 years ago, kids used to run out there and play all kinds of, open sports and hide and go seek and all this. Now, kids are in the house. A lot of them are playing them sports. You got to watch your kids. You can't just do like you used to do where you just go to work and all they're going to play with their friends and this and that. You got to watch them. You got to know if they're sitting in there too long. You got to watch them. You got to keep your eye on them. You got to make sure they're actively involved. Oh, I'm busy. Yeah, you're busy, but this is what I'm talking about. These are things are how you change. You got to change with the times. You got to make sure they're involved and you're involved. Like I said, things change. You have to change. You can't apply the same strategies when it comes to dealing with people that you did 30 years ago. And the young people that go, oh, things have changed. You don't understand. Things do change. A lot of us get offended because I've had my children say to me, oh, you know what? You're of a different generation. You don't understand. And see, me with my ego, I get offended. I'm like, yes, I do understand. Things are the same as they used to be. And then I get an attitude. Well, the truth is, if I really think about it, they're right. I just don't like the way they approach me. To me, it was too disrespectful. So I got my back up and I got my blinders on. But if I was realistic, I'd be like, you know what? They really have something to say. These kids, they really got a message. Maybe I should take some time, and think about what they say and process. That's one thing I want people to do as well. I want people to, when they do have confrontation, even verbal confrontation with the children, I want you to take at least 2 to 3 hours minimum, even if you have to take a day, and then process it and come back. You're not going to be as mad. We talk about the children being reactive, but we're reactive to the children as well. We respond immediately because we want to stamp it out, and it's respect. I mean, I've had kids say, and a lot of you parents have, we're going to have to talk about this when kids say certain things to you and you're like, oh my God, it's so disrespectful. And then we go right back at them. We don't get time to process. Well, that's what we need to do before we make a decision. It applies in life. Before you make a decision, you got to take some time. That should be a rule in life. When things happen, always take time before you make the decision, because you need to get your brain to process. But a lot of us are just, things happen and we just immediately respond. And the real truth, is that we punish ourselves when we don't respond quick enough. Right? Oh man, the counselor could go all day on this stuff. All right? Because you know what? I love talking about these topics because these are real experiences. And I'm telling you, we need to take the time. And it's just like with our children where we started with the cry. We need to take some time to learn about the babies. We need to, not just when we're having our partners have these babies, but as we grow, we don't just send them to school, but a lot of you do. And this is a funny thing too, I'm going to tell you. A lot of you send your kids to school. Not all of you, but there's a percentage of parents that send their kids to school. And the parents that are at that school are really called teachers. I said it. They're parenting your children. They're caring for your children. And they have the best intentions. And I just find that there's wonderful people out there that support the teachers. And then there's some that, they go in there and act the fool. And then they talk down to teachers. Now, are all teachers perfect? No, they're not. But we have to believe in the greater good of people and work with people. I'm not saying you can't challenge a teacher. You can, but there's ways to do it. Right? There's ways to talk. There's ways to communicate. And I just ask, when somebody's caring for your children, instead of going on a defensive, and I'm guilty of this as a parent. I've been on the defensive because I want to get my children's back. In my culture, it's like you got their back. Everybody else is wrong but them. Well, yes, you still got to have your children's back no matter what. However, you do need to ask the question, how can I support my children, and what's in their best interest for real? What lesson am I going to teach if I just blame everybody else? You're going to have to really think about your actions. That's why I say, when your child is putting a lot in your head, oh, the teacher did this to me, or the teacher said that to me, and all this, instead of just getting emotional and reacting, I want you to take some time out, think about it, a day or so, set up a meeting if you're concerned, and go in and talk about it. not be just reactive. Because there are teachers out there, 99.99% of them are out there doing wonderful jobs, and they really have the best interest, and we need to support them. And if there is some issue, then we need to come collectively to deal with it. And we need to show your children that it's not us against them, right? So we need to understand that. And we need to support our children as well. But the best way is to set an example, model appropriate behavior. Man, we've talked about so much today, and that's the counselor. And I want to say to my people out there, I appreciate you listening, and I want to be telling you that it's important that we talk to our children. It's important that we learn about our children, and it's important that we take care of ourselves and we listen and be patient. When things happen, learn to process. Understand you need time to process. Okay? So, be like the wise old bird, spread the word, and take care of yourself.